started. Welcome to Perspective in Practice. I'm your host, Rachel Sadoff, and today we have Robert Peterkins, um, data strategy consultant with MasterCard. How are you today, Robert?
I am doing well. How are you?
I'm great. I'm great. So, Robert, I would love to just kind of start out today with you just kind of sharing a little bit about your leadership origin story.
Sure. So I started out, I actually started working for major corporations very early. So I tell people I worked for Citibank when I was a senior doing my undergrad. So I actually worked for Citibank on 53rd and Park and came in there as a technologist and they kind of hired me. So I kind of continued and just moved over one desk when I became a full-time employee. And since then, I've been working for major corporations, Fortune 50, Fortune 100 corporations, mostly banks, mostly in financial services. So, in addition to Citibank, I worked at what's now Deutsche Bank. I worked at Bank of America and JP Morgan Chase. And as you said, MasterCard. My career has mostly been centered around data strategy, risk management, and then financial services more broadly.
Yeah. And you've worked kind of for all different sizes of banks. Is that correct?
That is correct. So when I worked for Citibank was the largest bank in the world when I was there. When I was working for JP Morgan Chase, it was the largest bank in the world as well. Mastercard is much smaller, right? So I went from working in big skyscrapers to working in a building that's a three-story campus. I also worked for Thomson Reuters in my career, which was a very small group. My whole department was about 40 people. And it was, still financial services. We did risk management for banks, but a very small size organization that worked really well.
Yeah. So can you share a little bit about what it's like, transitioning from working in a smaller, kind of more client-focused company to a larger organization? Because I know even just for us in training and development, sometimes we get to these larger organizations and we're doing training for just like a small fraction or portion of their employees. And so it kind of feels like we're just like a dot in the map.
Sure. I think as you transition from a smaller company to a larger company, you have to be aware of you're sort of more aware of the people around you because you're fitting in with the larger team. When you're working for a small organization, it's very easy to get to the C level, right? When I told you I work for Thomson Reuters, well, I can kind of walk into the CTO's office or the CIO's office. If you're working at JP Morgan Chase, it's a lot harder. So you have to understand the politics of a larger organization. You have to understand the culture. You need people who have your success invested with them. So you need mentors, you need coaches as you're sort of moving on. So
Yeah. So, how did those experiences kind of shape your perspective on making career decisions that align with your personal goals rather than, industry expectations?
yeah, so one of the things that happened as I went from a smaller company to a larger company, I realized that one of the things that you always have to keep in mind with your career is where your individual strengths lie. So it's very easy, especially when you're going to a bigger corporation, to find yourself in a role that you can do well at, right? That you can succeed, but it's not necessarily your strengths. So I have people who, they'll come back on their performance review, says, exceeds expectations, and then they go home at night and they're not happy. And why does that happen? Well, it happens because they're not working along their strengths. So an example, I'll find someone who has a very strong analytical problem solving background, but they'll find themselves in a project management role where they're meant to update senior management. So well, yes, they can do it if they have the right amount of knowledge and experience. They somehow have managed to get themselves in a role that doesn't suit them well. So to get back and answer your question, as I've gone through my career, I kind of went from the smaller company to the larger company. And then I kind of gone back to smaller companies as I realized my skill set is really one in which, I'd rather be a big fish in a small pond as opposed to the other way around.
Yeah. Yeah. Strength-based leadership is something that we at Break the Norm are like always preaching to people is, understand your uniques, understand the things um that you're good at and you're passionate about because those really help make your career something that you're going to enjoy, something you're good at, and then can help you move around within the organization. So you've really emphasized the importance of knowing your strengths and building a career around them. How did you discover your own strengths and how have they guided your career choices?
Sure. So I'm a big believer in the various assessments out there. So you have strengths finders, you have disc profiles, of emotional intelligence. I'm a big believer in it because I think it's really important for you as a leader to understand, how you accomplish success, how you move forward. I'm also a big believer in having mentors and coaches because you have blind spots. Everyone has blind spots, and that's what a mentor and a coach will really help you sort out, right? And help mitigate against those things that you're not good at. So I was fortunate to have enough mentors, enough coaches to really help me understand where my strengths are. And I've had coaches, for example, tell me, I can't see you doing that job right before I was about to accept it. I said, that doesn't look like you, Rob, but I don't think you'll be happy there. And so you need to have that sort of network of friends, network of coaches, et cetera.
Yeah. Yeah. People to just kind of hold the mirror up to you and
Yeah.
you know, we talk a lot about like being in the right seats on the bus and as a leader it's crucial that you know the people that are on your team. And not only do you have the right skill sets and the right people on your team, but having them seated in the right positions within the organization or within your team to kind of help you maximize efficiency and your ability, maximize your team's ability. So, how can professionals, would you say, assess whether they're in the right seats on the bus and align with roles that leverage their strengths?
Yeah, well, like I said, I think one of the ways you can do that is to, um, you know, through the assessments you can do it. The other thing that I tell people to pay attention to that they somehow miss, that people don't pay enough attention to, is their performance reviews, right? People go through their performance reviews. They're like, am I getting a bonus? Am I not getting a bonus? What's my rating? But really pay attention to the feedback that you're getting for others, right? Because you'll hear people, oh, so and so is great, but they're not good at following up, right? And some people take it personally. I think you really got to be able to accept that feedback and say, hey, that'll help me decide, is this really the position for me? Am I really in the right seat? Am I really in the right seat on the bus, as you would say, right? And so I think you want to be able to look at your performance reviews, really not be afraid to talk about your manager, about your progress as you're going through the year, instead of just at the end of the year in your performance review.
Yeah. What would you say to somebody? Um, Okay, I'm just going to call this out, and people might agree or disagree, but oftentimes people of color don't get the same amount of feedback or the same amount of actionable feedback that can help them move towards their goals in organizations. So, what would you say to somebody who's maybe not getting great feedback, but is wanting to work towards a specific goal and like how they can do that? What would you recommend to somebody like that?
So, first of all, yeah, I agree. People of color and other disadvantaged folks sometimes have a hard, actually, should say sometimes, often will have a hard time getting feedback from others. It's important that, well, first of all, that they're leveraging whatever, you know, organizations exist in their company. Like a lot of times people aren't joining organizations that are really meant to help them. Outside of the organization is also important. I belong to a number of different external organizations like ITSMF, NESB, which is Society of Black Engineers, ELC, and those programs will help you get mentors through them, and they'll help you with understanding again when your strengths and weaknesses are within. within your organization, that's something I would also, if you're not getting good help and good mentors within your organizations, bring it up to your boss. So, let your boss know, hey, I'm feeling a bit isolated here. I notice the other people on the team, they have the senior folks are taking them out. I'm feeling a bit isolated. So you want to make sure that if you're not getting the right mentorship, guidance, support, raise your voice, let people know, right? This is very important.
Yeah. Yeah. I think sometimes it's hard for people of color, and especially immigrants to really find their voice sometimes in organizations. But do you have any suggestions for people to help them build their confidence in just kind of finding their voice and being a little bit more assertive or asking for what they're needing?
Yeah. So a couple of things. I mean, a lot of organizations will have things that individuals can volunteer for, right? We talk about Toastmasters. We talk about other organizations. I think one of the things that I tell people, you'll find someone who's introverted and they're not getting the support that they want. You sort of have to force yourself to get involved, right? One of the things that's very important is visibility,
Yeah.
right? There's some people, that walk down the halls and no one knows who that person is, or no one knows what that person does, right? I think if you can combine working on the things that you're good at, excelling in your role and being visible, that's the first steps in term towards you getting to the next level. So for someone that's not getting that support, especially if they're a person of color, or other minority, I think you really want to force yourself to get up and get around and be involved in activities in the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, we talk a lot about like executive presence and, just, like Toastmasters, that's like a big part of helping you kind of build that executive presence, especially for people that are wanting to move up in their organization. But it's funny because executive presence is such a broad phrase, I
Right,
guess,
correct.
of
Agreed.
like, what does executive presence really mean? And like, what are those skill sets somebody needs to develop in order to have executive presence? And I'm curious, for you, what does that mean to you? And what kind of skills or what kind of things are you looking for in terms of like attitude, ability? Like what are those things that you're looking for when you're looking at somebody and assessing like executive presence?
Yeah. So the one thing I look for is, how well does the person, understand the business, understand what my objectives are?
Mhm.
I remember, I think I was at Chase and I had a bunch of technologists and they were great at their technical ability, but no one really understood how we made money,
Yeah,
right? So no one understood what my 12 to 18-month roadmap was. No one really understood my job. So from an executive presence standpoint, I want to know that someone understands what the long-term strategy is. Someone can communicate that in a very concise manner in which I can understand, that someone is able to communicate at all levels. So if they're talking to me, you can book a 30-minute meeting with me. I may be 5 minutes late and have to leave 5 minutes early. So you need to be aware of that, right? And I could pick any bullet point and ask you to drill down on it. So you want to come in with the right executive summary level, right? That I can quickly absorb and lead and read. But you also want to be able to drill down on the points if need be. So someone that really kind of gets in and understands, what we're looking for.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I kind of took you off course. Sorry.
No, no, no,
Where
no,
we
no.
originally kind of planned to talk. But so you've talked about kind of chasing, because I'm going back a little bit to kind of what we had planned to chat about. You've talked a little bit about chasing higher salaries at different points in your career. And, sometimes that has to do with like going to bigger organizations, because obviously, usually bigger organizations make more money, which means they can pay higher to their people, which you later called one of your biggest mistakes. So, how did that experience shape how you evaluate new opportunities in your career?
Right. So what happens is larger organizations will pay you more And
Yeah.
so you kind of you're incentivized to kind of take that job that you might otherwise not take. Um, One of the things that I've learned is if you take a job that isn't meant for you, isn't aligned with your skills, you eventually will crash. And so that's the mistake that I've made. I've taken jobs that um, I kind of went into knowing don't really enjoy it, right? Not really what I'd want to do. I at this point in my career can manage pretty much any project, I would say. I'm a project manager several times over, but there's certain jobs that I prefer not to do. I'm a very people person, right? I get energy from other people. So me sitting at my desk working on project plans or PowerPoints, not really what I want to do. I want to be out and about. So what I've learned is that I need to focus along my strengths. So I started out working in an environment where I was kind of known everywhere. Smaller companies, as I said, you can get to the senior managers very quickly. As you go to larger organizations, you can find yourselves into the depth of the organization, where you're 5, 6, 7 layers away from the real decision makers for the organization. For me personally, I like to be as close to the decision makers as possible, right? I want to be helping the organization define the strategy as opposed to being told the strategy. So that's why I've sort of moved from the large organizations to the smaller ones because I find it aligns with my strengths very well.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Um, when it comes to strengths, it's always important to understand, what drives you, whether it's money, impact, other things, when it comes to career decisions. Like, tell me a little bit more on your opinion on this.
Yeah, so one of the things that happens is you really want to work along your strengths and your passions, right? And if you do that, eventually the money will come. At least that's what people will tell you. But it is true, right? I mean, you could, and so I think you want to work and you want to put yourself in the best position to be successful in the job that you're going to be most happiest with, and then the compensation will follow. You can get compensation at a larger company, right? And I've made these mistakes of going there because look, I increased my salary by 30%. That's huge. But then you got to realize that may be short lived, right? And as soon as that company has layoffs, guess what, right? You're a meets expectations employees, right? And you're meets expectations employee, and they're having layoffs. So guess what happens to you? So you really want to go to a job where you're going to be excelling, right? You're playing against your strengths, and and then the salary will come. And the earlier you do that in the career, the better, right? Because I found people who've kind of gone out and they've kind of struggled through, organizations, and they go out and buy a big house. And so now they have this mortgage that they're under, and they get laid off, and then they have all sorts of stress and anxiety outside of work. So you want to really understand who you are, where you excel, how you excel, do it early in your career, and then the compensation and the salary will follow. Me personally, I've chased the salary at times, and then I've gone to the point where I've gone to smaller roles and have taken less money and been twice as happy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the golden handcuffs are such a thing that some of these larger organizations also will just try to lock you in on in order to just retain their staff. Like the culture of an organization can be terrible, but they pay you X amount of money, and now you've gone and spent it on a car payment, a mortgage, private school for your kids, whatever it is. And so now you're kind of stuck there.
Yeah,
Because I've also seen that kind of happen with some of the larger organizations that I've kind of known or consulted with.
yeah, and I tell people, at the end of the year, executives and senior leaders are dealing with the bonus pool, right? And the key word there is pool, right? That means you're lumped in with a bunch of other people, right? Sometimes there's only 4 or 5 of you in the pool. Sometimes there's 6 or 7 of you in the pool, or 7 or 8 or 9. So what you're getting from a compensation standpoint is determined by who else is around you, right? I mean, organizations will have forced ranking, right? You can't have a department and everyone exceeds expectations, right? That's not possible. Somebody does not exceed expectation, especially if we need to get, this person over here promoted, right? You may be affected by it. That's why I say in the large organizations, certain things happen from a political standpoint, from a cultural standpoint that you can't control.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So navigating back to like risk and rewards in career decisions, you've worked in both risk management and data management roles. How has your background in these fields influenced how you evaluate career risk and reward?
Sure. So one of the things, I think when you look at going forward, you have to say, hey, I think this is the right role for me. But, what happens if it doesn't work out? What happens if it doesn't work? One of the things I tell people, if you're in a job that's not fitting your skill set, you're better off leaving sooner rather than later. And if you leave on good terms, you can come back. So I've coached people and I've said, if you take this job and it doesn't work out, you can go back. Or there've been people who've worked for me and they've resigned and moved on. I said, well, if it doesn't work out, you can come back, right? And so, when you look at risk management, I think you want to move forward, but understand, where you are. You can be moving to, and this is a challenge with small companies. You could be moving to a company. Small companies are more risky. So you may be in a job that better meets your skill set, but what happens if this company is bought out? So you got to understand what your risks are as you move around throughout your career. There are always risks. There could be a new manager could come in. You say, "Wow, I'm going to sit and wait and see what this new manager does and how he or she reorganizes the department." Or you can say, "You know what? I'm going to look internally. I'm going to look externally because I'm not willing to accept the risk
Yeah.
that may be associated with it."
No, that's such a great point that I think a lot of people kind of get stuck in their role or position and sometimes you just need to be proactive and you need to be self-reflective and say, maybe this isn't the right role for me before somebody else says, maybe this isn't the right role for you. And then take some kind of action
Yeah.
that makes it so that you're not able to come back to the organization.
Yeah, the other thing with risk, you said, what have we learned from risk management, or what have I learned from risk management? The other thing that I've learned is hedge, right? That's a big part of risk, right? It's like I could say something fancy to you, like, "Hey, credit derivatives." You're like, "What does that mean?" I said, "Don't worry about what it means. It just means that I have something that if my trades fall through, right, I have something that I can hedge and fall back on." Same thing in your career. Make sure you sort of hedge your decisions, right? If I go through this, um, I can go back, right? Or I have colleagues at this company, right? If I end up laid off, you know what? I have a broad enough network that I'll
Yep.
be able to find something. So make sure you know what your options are. And, a lot of times people think, they think about it as point A to point B. I'm in this job, I'm going to go to the next job. And really what you want to do is say, hey, I'm in this job. I have this network of colleagues and professional connections. So I have a number of different paths that I can pursue.
Yeah, a colleague of mine, this got me thinking about a colleague of mine, and we always joke that he's retired 3 times
Yes.
because he's great at risk management. He's worked at some really big organizations. He knew that layoffs were coming, and he said, he did kind of that risk management assessment of like, what is the chance that I get laid off? Or when the organization is asking, hey, is anybody willing to leave with a package? Maybe I leave with the package because I know that the risk of me, getting laid off could be high because I'm good at my job, but am I great at my job? Am I great enough for the organization to keep me? I don't know. And so, he's been laid off 3 times and has taken very nice packages with him. And, we just say, oh, he's retired 3 times. He's working on his fourth right now, kind of thing. But he knows his skills and he knows his strengths and where he lies in the industry and has just been able to take those to different organizations and helped when he could be helpful.
Yeah, and if you're in my industry in financial services, layoffs are inevitable. It's just the way the industry works. Right? But you have to realize that sometimes it's for the good. As you said, you can get some people get a nice package. Um, Sometimes you're just in such a hostile, horrible situation that someone giving you a package where you could take 6 months off to really discover who you are is fantastic, right? You mentioned retirement. The new word that's come out now is preferment, right? I want to do not retiring. I'm just doing what I prefer to do, right? And with that, you line up with your family or whoever else and say, hey, this amount of income, this sort of compensation, it will allow me to do what I want to do, right? And really enjoy the things that I enjoy outside of the office.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really important that, the career that you choose is really in alignment with your motivation, your values, your goals, the things you want, and, your overall quality of life. Is the stress worth it?
Yeah, well, right. And when you get up in the morning, you go into work, you want to feel good about being there. There's nothing worse than dreading, I'm pushing the button on the elevator or, I've had times where, you're at the elevator bank, you're like, I'll let this elevator go because I'm just, I'm not that excited about going or whatever.
I'll
I
take
can
the stairs.
I'll take the stairs, right? It's
To
like,
the
oh,
20th floor. I'll
like
be there in an hour, guys.
yeah, I was gonna say you want to be excited about what you do, right? You want to make sure you want to feel as if you're making a contribution. You want to make sure that you feel you're growing. So that's important, right? Compensation, obviously, you want to make the right compensation and enjoy the lifestyle that makes sense for you. But your mental health is extremely important. I'm so glad that the industry in general is paying more attention to mental health and other sorts of things and helping people out in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. So, for professionals early in their careers, how can they start identifying what truly motivates them and kind of avoid that external chaser marker of success?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that when you're early in your career, you really should have a mentor, right? So a lot of times organizations will have formal mentoring programs, and depending on what level you have, they'll give you access to coachings, et cetera. But you want to make sure that you have a mentor. And if you can't find someone in your organization, there are probably people outside of your organization who'd be willing to talk to you twice a month, right, for an hour, or even if it's just once a month. When you're young, you really want to make sure that you have someone who can kind of see you or help let you know if you're on the right path, right? Because you want to understand your hallway reputation, right? What are people saying, when you're not around, right? You want to understand, where you fit in the organization, right? A lot of times people will tell you what you want to hear to their face, but behind the scenes, you want to make sure that you have people who are helping you understand where you are, understand your blind spots, and how to navigate around them.
Yeah. So, for young people that are still learning the difference between like mentorship and sponsorship, how would you define the difference, and when would you say it's time for you to move from more of like a mentee role or having a bunch of mentors versus having some sponsors to help you in your organization?
Sure. I mean, I think that's where you know, people of color and other minorities struggle, right? There'll be people who are willing to mentor you, right? Say, here's something you should think about. It is something, that you need to work on. But they don't often have sponsors, right? Someone that's going to sit in a room amongst their peers that where we're looking at who should be promoted, and someone who's going to raise their hand and say, I'll stick up for you, right? I'm going to put your name there, right? I'm a senior manager. I will sponsor you for this promotion, right? And I'll fight with my peers, right? So, um, you know, we can get mentors, but we don't always get sponsors, and that's really where a lot of the that's where a lot of the break comes when we think about people from color. So if I'm at the start of the year, right, and I don't have a senior manager that's looking to sponsor me for promotion, I'm not going to get promoted, right? And so what happens is, you'll have someone, oh, I think I should be promoted, and it's sitting it's July or August. And if there's no scene, I'll say to them, well, who's going to sponsor you? Who's going to be in the room speaking for you? And I'm
Yeah.
not talking about your manager. I'm talking about one of your clients, one of your stakeholders, who's going to sponsor you. If you can't readily identify that person, then you need to work on your sponsorship.
Yeah.
And how do you do that? You can ask your mentee for help. You can talk to your boss and say, hey, I need to get someone who can sponsor me for getting to get to the next level.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just not possible in the organization you're in. I mean, it's perfectly acceptable to say, I need to move on because I don't have the right sponsorship in this organization.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think that a lot of people need to hear that because I think there's just a lot of fear of, moving on too quickly or seeing like gaps in resumes or seeing that people are moving a lot because uh there's that like dichotomy of people that stay forever in one career and
Right.
now like it's viewed not great to do that anymore. But then there's also some of the younger people that are skipping every year or two to new
Yeah.
organizations and kind of being judged that way.
What I tell people, especially younger people, is I like to see people move every 2 to 3 years. Right. Now that doesn't mean you leave your organization, right? That means, sometimes it's getting promoted, right? Sometimes it's taking another role on a team. Sometimes I'll tell someone who's U.S. based, hey, go work abroad for the same for a different role, right? Even if it's at the same level. That's why I'm big on working along your strengths, right? Sometimes you'll take a lateral role, right, at the same level, but you want to. I feel every 3 years, every 2 to 3 years, you want to move, right? You could be at the same company for 10 years and have three jobs, right? I mean, I was at a company for 6 years and had three jobs actually during that time that I was there.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Robert, for just sharing your journey and your leadership insights. It's been a pleasure hearing about your experiences and the lessons you've learned along the way. And for our viewers, if you've enjoyed hearing Robert's insights today, don't miss other Break the Norm leadership interviews. If your organization is interested in learning about how Break the Norm leadership can help you develop your greatest asset, your people, click the link below. Thanks again, Robert.
Take care. Great speaking as always.